Hi everyone and welcome to my Touch of Death Spiritborn guide. This is one of the strongest builds in the game going into Season 6. I already covered the Quill Volley Spiritborn, which is also like top tier, top notch. And here we have another build that has a pretty interesting setup. It was a lot of fun to play. I had the access to the press release here and I played Spiritborn for like 100 hours, trying out all kinds of things, trying many builds, and this was one of them. What you see here in the clip is a very scuffed setup. It was not very easy to get good items here, so this can definitely go all the way to like pit 100 plus relatively easily, and it's looking like it might actually be the highest pushing build in the game. So this is how good Touch of Death is, and it has a lot of interesting combos in the like build and the setup and how it functions, so I want to explain those to you. The way that Touch of Death works is that you attack an enemy, it's a single target attack, and then you apply a huge poison dot to the target. And if the dot expires or the target dies, then a swarm hatches. These are these glowing green orbs that are floating around here. You can have 3 of those swarms up at the same time. And what actually does the damage here is not the attack or those swarms, but it's when those swarms explode with the insatiable aspect. This is an aspect that is exclusive to Touch of Death, where when you replace one of your swarms, it then explodes and it does a massive amount of flat damage to everything around it. So this is the main combo that we are building around here. There are other ways of playing Touch of Death, but this is most likely the strongest one because those Touch of Death explosions on the swarms are really powerful. They do like multiple times the amount of the damage that the swarm would have done as a burst, and you can also extend the duration of those swarms, increasing the damage of the burst as well. There are tempers for Touch of Death swarm duration, for example, and in general it just seems to like have the highest bang for your buck. Now is the question, how do you actually get those swarms to burst frequently? Well, you can spam Touch of Death into one target, but what you will do is you'll just kind of like ramp up multiple infections, and you have to actually wait until those infections expire to then get those swarms to hatch. And then when you have more than 3 and another one hatches, the other one will explode. So you don't really want to wait like 9 seconds or longer every time you do that. And the way to solve this is with Noxious Resonance, which is one of the key passes on the Spiritborn that allows you to instantly remove the poisoning, effectively hatching the swarm as soon as you attack the enemy, and you don't have this 9 seconds delay. So you just walk into a pack, you start passing, and for example here right now you can see that there is this delay sometimes because I was not actually using it in this clip, and you have to wait. So this is fine for like pit pushing, for like the higher end. You can actually swap the key passive away to Prodigy's Tempo. I'll explain that in the planner section of this guide, but for typical content and speed farming, you don't really have time to wait 9 seconds. So you just use Noxious Resonance, you attack an enemy, you get a crit, and then that crit will burst the swarm instantly. The good part is that we have a way to guarantee critical strikes with this build with the Rod of Kepileke plus the Midnight Sun combo. This is a very interesting and widely used combo on Spiritborn as well. The way this works is that you need to fill your resource bar, and when you reach full resources and you attack, you will get a guaranteed crit that is empowered with extra damage and extra size and so on from the Rod of Kepileke. And then you can use the Midnight Sun Ring to then restore all of the resources when you do that attack and you get a crit. So they have like a really strong synergy, and you need to just stack up enough resource generation from, for example, a Ring Temper. There's a bunch of stuff on Paragons, and you get some from Ravager, for example. And as long as you hit a certain threshold where you constantly reset your entire resource bar from 0 to full with one attack, you can always get a Rod of Kepileke proc and always get that Noxious Resonance proc, and the build becomes very smooth in late game. So while technically you can try to level up with Touch of Death, I would recommend to just use one of the core skills to get to, you know, the higher levels at least on your character until you actually unlock Touch of Death and you have a few synergies like the Noxious Resonance and a bit of crit chance, and then in the late game you can make the whole combo work, and it becomes better and better as you go. So for the max roll guide, for example, I also only made an endgame guide, not a leveling version for this build, but technically you can try to make that work. In any case, here's the max roll guide. So I will show this off a little bit. This is a full fleshed out written guide that you can also check out with all of the details, how everything works. We have all the Paragon embedded here, the skills, the glyphs, the runes, everything that you want to look up here. We also have this mechanics section that goes into detail about, you know, a lot of these, you know, the numbers, for example, on the Marine of the Midnight Sun that I explained with the Kapileki combo. So this is pretty important to understand in order to actually deal damage with this build. So you need to hit the point where your Midnight Sun ring will always restore your entire resource bar. So just keep that in mind, and you can do this with external resource generation. And then there are certain like thresholds that you need to reach depending on your roles. And there's a lot of other helpful information in here about, you know, how everything works on a class, so you can go check it out. I'll explain the most important things now. And here we have the planner. So this looks like this. We have multiple setups here. So we have the T1 starter, Ancestral, Mythic, and then Speed Farm and Pit Push. So all these are a little bit different. This is kind of like when you're fresh level 60, you get started with this stuff. And then Ancestral, we include all of the uniques here. And Mythic, well, in this case, this build actually doesn't even run a Mythic item by default, but we can actually run Mythics. For example, here in Speed Farming, I put a Shaker, and in Pit Push, we have the Shroud of False Death, which is like a pretty massive damage buff in situations where you don't really care that much about your cooldown reduction, for example. We can go with the Shroud of False Death. And for example, here's like this one switch that we do with the Noxious Resonance key passive going to Prodigy's Tempo, which then helps us to reduce our cooldowns instead of, for example, the Jack of Shell here in the other progression variants. So I'll start with showing off the Mythic variant. So this is like kind of the final goal of your setup here. We have Harmony of Ebawaka. This is like a very powerful staple for the Spiritborn builds. This gives you damage reduction and then gives you like this combination of different tags here. So we can, for example, have 3 tags on our skills. Touch of Death is a Centipede skill. Then we have Gorilla, Main Hall, that gives us barriers. We don't care about the Thorn stuff, but it also allows us to trigger Gorilla skill synergies, for example, the unyielding hits aspect here. So it's very easy to keep this up all the time when you have your Gorilla attack on all of your skills. And this is a very, very powerful aspect. Effectively, you want to stack up a lot of armor on your build. So you see here, for example, in the planner, we have something like 4,500 armor. This is not even counting all of the bonuses that we have. So it's something like 5,000. Is kind of the target here, and this then gives you a much bigger kind of weapon damage base. So the weapon damage base of a quarter staff at 800 item power is 542, and for example, when you have 5,000 armor and you get 30% of that as extra weapon damage, you have 1,500 extra. So it's roughly a quadruple damage multiplier. So it is very, very powerful. So this is kind of the reason to have Harmony here. And then we also get, for example, Jaguar synergies. There's a bunch of passives here, which is kind of nice. We have Jack and Shell. This is worth explaining. So this one gives you lots of cooldown reduction, or rather it speeds up the cooldown recovery. So it's not exactly the same, but basically all of your cooldowns just tick down all the time and way, way faster. And this effectively means you have basically everything up all the time. So Scourge all the time, you have Ravager permanently, you have Counterattack permanently, 100% dodge chance. You have the Hunter very often, like every 5 seconds or something if it doesn't reset itself. And Armored Hide is also nearly permanent. So you have lots of block, unstoppable, dodge. You have the extra resources from the Ravager here. This is one of the upgrades. Measured Ravager gives you 30% vigor generation, also allows you to dash in with your core skill. While Touch of Death is not actually a core skill, we make it a core skill with this upgrade here. So this unlocks a bunch of these synergies like this one and the Kapileki, for example. And yeah, in general, Jack and Shell is a very powerful item. The only time we don't really use it is here in the Pit Push, as I mentioned, because here we don't care about Noxious Resonance. We just don't really care that much about the delay. Like when you fight like a boss for 5 minutes or something in like a higher tier pit, then, you know, the few seconds delay at the start of the fight doesn't really matter. So we go Prodigies, and we don't need Jack and Shell, we go Shroud for extra damage. But yeah, most of the time you want to go with the Jack and Shell, and it's just really, really good for cooldown reduction. But it does drain your life, so especially when you are not fighting, you have to be careful that it just leaves you at 1 HP. And if you like walk into a boss room, you want to press the potion once at the start, for example. We also have a few barriers here, so we have Auspicious that just like accumulates the barrier while you're not fighting, so this kind of like, you know, counteracts that problem a little bit. And we also have other barriers from the Gorilla Hall, and I think we even have the rune here, yes, the Quair rune, the Bulwark. So in general, you're gonna have a lot of barrier on this build, but some of them are also kind of like short duration. Only Auspicious really has like a permanence, and the others only last a few seconds. And we also have the Rakonov's Wake here. This is a very good pair of boots for Spiritborn builds, I think, because it gives you tons of resistances. You can choose to like run Trials, for example, but Jack and Shell is just so good that I just really like that on this class. It just helps you so much with the cooldowns, and you fix your resistances this way. And having all the resistances you ever need on the boots allows you to go like full armor. You can stack armor here on the pants, you can put it even on the glove if you want. You can have a big armor roll here and armor tempers, and then the skulls and the jewelry, and this is how you actually reach those high armor values here, like 4,000 or 5,000 or so in the late game, because you just don't need to roll any resistances anywhere. We don't care about the effect of Ragnarok. It's basically just the res, and it has okay stats. Here's the Kepileke and the Midnight Sun. I explained this at the start, so you need to reach that point where your Midnight Sun will constantly reset your entire resource bar. If you don't hit full resources, then you will actually do much less damage, because you'll probably just like spend everything again after like a few attacks, or it will take a while to even get to full from there, and you will just not proc a lot of Kepileke. You don't get the guaranteed crit, you don't pop your swarms, and you also don't get this extra damage multiplier that a lot of Kepileke provides, which is actually massive. So you need to really invest into resource generation. And for example, in the earlier game, you probably want to go like double or even triple resource generation tempers. So you can actually do that here. For example, here's a ring, resource generation, and you can even put it on the neck if you want. And this will help you to kind of get that going earlier. And with so many uniques, it doesn't leave us as many aspects. So the Insatiable I covered, this makes your swarms pop. Then we have Redirected Force, that gives us extra crit damage for scaling block chance. Since we have near permanent 100% block chance, is a lot of extra damage. And we have the Annealing hits here. In the early game, a few of those aspects are replaced because we don't have that many uniques, and you can like actually throw in something like a Starlight for extra resources. There's a bunch of other resource aspects that you can throw in here just to kind of like, make the build a bit smoother when you don't have all those uniques available yet. So if you're starting fresh at level 60 or something, then yeah, any kind of resource aspect will kind of help you. Then you can try to, get some generator in here. We have Rock Splitter, for example. In the late game, this is not needed at all. You just like refresh your resources all the time. But early on, you might want to have something like a Rock Splitter on your bar. And, you have a few other aspects that's kind of like fill these slots here that are otherwise occupied. For example, there's Potent Exchange. You can stack Resolve and then spend it for more damage for your potency skills. So this buffs your Touch of Death. And we have, for example, Resolve Generation here from Tenacity aspect. It's actually a Codex power, so you can actually get Resolve stacks pretty easily this way. Some notes about the stats. So we can scale our Touch of Death ranks indirectly kind of with core skill ranks here on the glove, and with basic skill ranks as well on the pants. Since we get the core skill tag here, and then a lot of Kepileke also adds the basic skill tag, we can use both of these, and we get a lot of extra skill ranks. Otherwise, we want to get a lot of attack speed, and then, make sure you have a lot of armor, and try to fit in life where you can. You see the life rolls are not actually that high here, because we have this unique weapon. It kind of like eats into our total life pool, but we do have really strong barriers, and we have, very high uptime on a lot of these defensive cooldowns here, so basically perma dodge and so on, as I mentioned, and this makes it just fine. And you have also incredible healing as well, so whenever you don't at least get a one shot, you will probably be fine because you have incredible healing. Another way to also become one shot defensive is to run with Rahir as your mercenary. So we have the mercenary here, and he has Valiance, which effectively gives you like a cheat death every 30 seconds. If you take like a large chunk of life as one hit, then he will protect you from that. And this also allows you to, like, when something gets through the cracks, let's say, of your multiple layers of defense with the barriers and the dodge and the block, then you still have this as a backup option. And this will make it feel relatively tanky despite having a relatively low life pool. And then you can also give us Fortify, so when stuff gets through a barrier, you have that. You get extra armor there. And finally have like some other upgrades here. And here's the Paragon. It looks like this. So we have the 4 boards: Convergence, Viscous Shield, Sapping, and Revealing. So this is like a relatively standard Spiritborn setup here, I think. Our glyphs are Spirit, this is crit synergies, very powerful. We have Bane for the poison synergies, most importantly for the poison damage on the primary here to scale the Convergence. Convergence needs either physical or any of the individual elemental types as like a stacked up stat, but it does not work with non-physical, unfortunately. So we need to have that glyph, even though we don't actually care too much about the secondary effect of the poisoning, but it's still so good that we want to scale the Convergence there. Then we have Viscous Shield. We have a lot of barriers here. We get extra damage for that. There's also a bunch of really good damage reduction nodes on this board. Here's the Revenge glyph. So right now, Revenge, the secondary, does not work with the primary Gorilla like Thorns effect, but only with like taking passive damage and then applying Thorns to the enemy that way. So it will not really be up on most targets, but on bosses it will probably scale up slowly as they hit you. But most importantly, it just gives us like a bonus to these rare nodes here. So we get extra resources that helps us with the capability scaling, and it's a kind of nice to have here. And I would also expect a fix to this relatively soon. So I put this here. Technically, you can have another glyph there as well. And then we have Colossal here, because it's extra resolve stacks scaling. So for example, with Armored Hide, we can fill up our resolve stacks, and then we have extra damage here, and we make everything Gorilla anyway from the Gorilla Hull tag. You can also see the Paragon progression a little bit here. So we have multiple steps. For example, if you have like roughly 200 Paragons, then this would look like this here with level 15 glyphs and then level 46 glyphs. And then here, like if you level a bit further, it kind of gives you a bit of direction of where to put your points as you level up. 200 is relatively easy to reach, and then 250 is, you know, kind of the dedicated players, and then 300 is when, you know, you really blast the season a lot. So we have all the options here available. You can also find the steps in the Maxwell guide. So if we go to the Paragons here, we have the slider where you can like see this very easily. That also concludes this guide here. So hope you enjoyed this. I wish you good luck in Season 6 in Vessel of Hatred. I'm very excited to jump in and blast with the Spiritborn again. I had a really good time trying it out when I had the early access. And now after actually cooking all those builds, oh man, I really want to log in and try this. So I'm very excited. In any case, hope you like this. Good luck, and I'll see you guys next time.